I didn't start noticing this because I wanted to. It's more like you start noticing a smell after you've been in a room too long and suddenly realize it's been there the whole time. At first, it was just one student, then two, then a pattern so consistent it felt like a franchise. Different faces, same script, same confidence, same speech rhythm, same ending, where reality is declared corrupt for not cooperating. The script usually begins with a sentence that sounds brave. Actually, that's not true. Or, they don't want you to know this. Or my personal favorite, delivered with a sigh that implies centuries of hidden wisdom. I've done my own research. The sentence isn't the problem. Curiosity is healthy. Doubt is necessary. The problem is what comes after, when doubt stops being a door and becomes a throne. Universities are perfect theaters for this. Lots of authority. Lots of complex systems. Lots of people who have spent decades learning very specific, very boring details about very important things. And then, every semester, someone stands up and announces that all of it can be replaced with a podcast, a thread, or a video that starts with dramatic music and ends with a coupon code. These aren't villains. They're not even stupid. That's the uncomfortable part. They're energetic. They're convinced. They're immune to boredom. They're also absolutely certain that any system that disagrees with them must be afraid, paid off, or morally compromised. Evidence becomes optional. Expertise becomes suspicious. And confidence, somehow, becomes a substitute for friction. So I started writing them down. Not to mock them. Not exactly. More like a naturalist with a notebook, watching a new species evolve in real time. The expert without experience. The revolutionary who can't follow instructions. The visionary who thinks syntax is oppression. Every story sounds different. Every ending is the same. It always arrives right after the same sentence. You're just not ready for this conversation. I was guest lecturing in a finance course, filling in for a colleague who was stuck in an airport somewhere between Zurich and Patience. The topic was risk models, probabilities, the unglamorous mathematics of not going bankrupt. About 10 minutes in, a student named Tyler raised his hand. He didn't wait to be called on. He stood up like the room was his stage and cleared his throat with ceremonial importance. Your models are based on fear, he said. Fear of what? I asked. Of abundance, he replied. You assume loss is real. I assume markets respond to belief. That sentence landed with the soft thud of something that sounds deep until you try to pick it up. Tyler explained that he'd been day trading for almost a year. He said it the way people say, I've been to Paris, expecting applause. He told the class that stop losses were for cowards and diversification was a myth invented by banks to keep people small. I go all in, he said. That's how you tell the universe you're serious. I asked him how it was working. He smiled. I'm up overall. By how much? He hesitated. It fluctuates. I pulled up a simple example on the projector. 2 strategies. Same starting capital. One conservative, one aggressive. The aggressive one looked great for a while, then fell off a cliff so hard it felt personal. That model is rigged, Tyler said. Rigged toward what? Old thinking, he replied. You can't quantify momentum of consciousness. Another student asked him what his actual returns were. About $200 last month, he said, then quickly added. But that's because I'm reinvesting. We talked about variance, about luck, about the difference between a good outcome and a good decision. He nodded politely, the way people do when they're waiting for you to finish being wrong. For his final project, he submitted a presentation titled, Why Risk is a Social Construct. It included 3 motivational quotes, 2 screenshots of green numbers, and 1 very angry slide about institutions being scared of his strategy. He failed. He emailed the department to say we were hostile to innovation and spiritually bankrupt. A semester later, I was sitting in on an introductory biology lab, mostly to observe how first years handled their first real experiments. The room had that particular mix of disinfectant and quiet anxiety, the kind that makes people suddenly read instructions very carefully. A student named Nina decided the protocol was too rigid. I've been watching some alternative research channels, she said. They show that cells respond better when you don't constrain them. The TA asked what she meant by don't constrain. Like, don't follow every step exactly, Nina said. You have to let the system express itself. She skipped half the procedure and replaced it with what she called intuitive adjustments. When her results didn't match anyone else's, she didn't look confused. She looked offended. These samples are conditioned, she said. They're not reacting naturally. The TA tried to explain controls. Replication. Why you change one variable at a time instead of all of them at once. That's reductionist, Nina said. Life is holistic. Later, when her culture failed completely, she accused the lab of using sterilized organisms designed to suppress emergent behavior. So dead, someone asked. Pre-biased, she corrected. In her lab report, she wrote that traditional biology was too focused on obedient cells and that real breakthroughs would come from listening instead of measuring. She didn't pass the course. In her appeal, she said the grading system punished creativity. During a campus open day, I was walking a group of prospective students and parents through the engineering building. We stopped near a scale model of a pedestrian bridge. A high school senior named Evan stared at it like it had personally insulted him. That design is inefficient, he said. In what way? I asked. Too dependent on support, he replied. I've been working on something better. He showed me a sketch on his tablet. The bridge looked like a series of floating panels connected by thin lines. It was beautiful. It was also impossible. It uses harmonic alignment, he said. If you tune the structure to the right frequency, it stabilizes itself. I asked what happens under load. Wind, people, temperature changes. You're assuming the environment is hostile, he said. That's outdated thinking. One of the professors invited him into a lab and ran a quick simulation. The model didn't collapse dramatically. It just sagged, then failed, quietly, like it was embarrassed for him. That software can't model emergent stability, Evans said. We explained, gently, that bridges are mostly about boring things like material limits and safety margins. That's why innovation dies here, he replied. His application essay accused the department of being trapped in pre-vibrational physics and claimed he was too original for incremental systems. He didn't get in. He posted a video saying universities were afraid of frequency-based infrastructure. After a while, the details blur and the shape becomes obvious. First comes the shortcut. A video, a thread, a summary of a summary. Then comes the leap from I learned something to I see what everyone else is missing. Once that leap happens, expertise becomes suspicious by default. Any disagreement must be political, emotional, or corrupt. Evidence stops being something you gather and starts being something you explain away. The more complex the system, the easier it is to accuse it of hiding things. The strange part isn't the mistakes. Everyone makes those. The strange part is the armor. The way confidence hardens exactly where curiosity should be. The way questions turn into speeches. The way uncertainty gets rebranded as courage. Real competence is slow. It's mostly invisible. You don't get applause for learning how not to be wrong. You just get fewer surprises. The shortcut offers something louder, identity. Not, I'm learning, but I'm awake. And once someone builds a self-image around being awake, any contradiction starts to feel like an attack, not information. In a political theory class, a student named Rachel decided it was time to reveal something the rest of us clearly weren't ready for. She waited until the lecture was about legal authority and then raised her hand with the confidence of someone about to expose a magic trick. Because that flag has fringe, she said, pointing, this classroom is technically under maritime law, which means you can't grade me. The room went quiet in that special way it does when everyone wants to see what happens next. The professor blinked once, then twice. Where did you hear that? A legal forum, Rachel said. People who understand the real system. He told her that decorative fringe doesn't change jurisdiction. She told him that was what they wanted him to say. If we're under maritime law, he said calmly, then I'm the captain of this vessel, and I'm ordering you to submit your paper. The class laughed. Rachel didn't. She stayed after to serve him a document she'd printed from the internet, complete with seals that looked suspiciously like clip art. Her paper was still late. Her grade was still real. She told her friends the university was afraid of citizen law. In a music theory class, a student named Oliver insisted he had perfect pitch and that the piano in the room was slightly out of tune. I can hear it, he said, wincing dramatically every time the professor played a middle C. The professor had been tuning professionally for years and had serviced that instrument that morning. Oliver made a show of covering his ears. It's sharp, he said. Technology just can't keep up with my sensitivity. The professor brought out a digital tuner. The note was perfect. Dead center. That thing is calibrated wrong, Oliver said. Machines don't understand nuance. For his performance exam, he played confidently. He was also consistently off. When he got his grade, he said the department was biased against natural talent and too dependent on numbers. He transferred the next semester to a program that valued intuition over measurement. In an introductory psychology course, a student named Aaron decided he was ready to start diagnosing people. He had read one pop psychology book and attended a 2-day seminar. He would interrupt lectures to say things like, "The way you're holding that marker suggests unresolved authority issues." The professor had been practicing clinically for over 20 years. One day, after Aaron spent 10 minutes explaining how the professor's tone indicated suppressed resentment, the professor looked at him and said, "And the way you're talking suggests you haven't read the syllabus. Sit down." Aaron told his friends the professor was threatened by his insight. In an advanced math course, a student named Victor argued that 0.999 repeating was not equal to 1. He spent days emailing the professor diagrams he'd drawn in a paint program. The professor showed him multiple proofs: algebraic, geometric, analytical. Victor dismissed them all as propaganda designed to make the world seem more orderly than it really is. "I don't accept conclusions that feel forced," he said. He dropped the class because he couldn't work in a system that ignored his truth. By this point, you might think these are just outliers. Loud people, edge cases. But the frequency is the point. Every department has a version. Every discipline gets its profit. Different jargon. Same posture. Same certainty. Same allergy to the boring work of being wrong in private before you're right in public. And the next ones were even better. Or worse, depending on your tolerance for irony. Underscore. During an archaeology seminar, a student named Kyle decided we were all being very naive. We were discussing excavation methods and how boring, careful work is the only thing that keeps you from inventing history by accident. "The pyramids weren't built with tools," Kyle said. "They used sound." The professor asked him what kind of sound. "Specific frequencies," Kyle replied. "You can find videos." He showed us a clip of a guy in a garage trying to make a pebble vibrate off a table. It didn't work, but Kyle explained that the energy field in the room must have been wrong. The professor brought up evidence: copper tools, sledges, ramps, inscriptions. Whole careers built on this stuff. Kyle rolled his eyes. That's the official story. When asked to demonstrate acoustic levitation with a paperweight and his phone, nothing happened. He said the room's aura was too negative. In his paper, he wrote that mainstream archaeology was afraid of the truth. In a linguistics lecture on language change, a student named Brian insisted that slang wasn't real language. "People who use it just can't think properly," he said. The professor, a sociolinguist, explained that slang follows rules and that language evolves whether anyone likes it or not. "That's how civilization declines," Brian replied. At the end of the lecture, the professor switched to Old English for 5 minutes. Brian didn't understand a word. "I guess your civilization hasn't caught up yet," the professor said. Brian wrote in his course feedback that the class promoted decay. On a field trip, a student named Hannah pointed at layered rock formations and said they were actually petrified trees from a race of ancient giants. The professor showed her marine fossils embedded in the stone. "Planted," Hannah said, "probably in the 50s. She recorded a video calling the professor a corporate shill for big geology. When her exam asked her to identify sedimentary layers, she wrote forest remains. She did not pass. In a media ethics class, a student named Trevor argued that fact-checking was censorship. "If a story feels true, that's what matters," he said. The instructor explained verification. Sources, corrections. Trevor said that was how narratives were controlled. For his final project, he submitted an article based entirely on screenshots and vibes. It got a 0. He said the grade proved the system was rigged. What all of this has in common isn't ignorance. It's relief. Certainty is comforting. It turns a complicated world into a simple story with heroes and villains, secrets and awakenings. Being wrong in public is embarrassing. Being awake in public is intoxicating. One gets you silence. The other gets you an audience. The internet is very good at rewarding confidence, especially when it's dressed like rebellion. A calm explanation doesn't go viral. A bold accusation does. A footnote doesn't get shares. A conspiracy does. So people start performing certainty. Not just holding beliefs, but acting them out. Disagreement becomes proof. Evidence becomes suspicious. And expertise starts to look like an obstacle instead of a resource. In a veterinary science class, a student named Emily argued that dogs were actually herbivores who had been conditioned by humans to eat meat. "My dog is thriving on berries and greens," she said. The professor showed her canine teeth and digestive systems designed for protein. "Propaganda from the pet food industry," Emily replied. She tried to convert the lab's rescue dogs. Animal services got involved. In a chemistry lecture, a student named Paul raised his hand and said atoms didn't really exist. "Everything is just concentrated thought," he said. The professor handed him salt and water and asked him to think them into a different compound. Paul stared at the beaker for a long time. Later, he said he didn't want to show off. In a business course, a student named Rick said the entire curriculum was obsolete because he had a dropshipping store. "It makes $300 a month," he said proudly. He spent every class explaining how the real world worked. His final project violated several trade regulations. He failed and said the school was afraid of his hustle. By now, the pattern wasn't just clear. It was loud. Different buildings. Different subjects. Same posture. Same script. Same ending, where reality is accused of being afraid. And then came the ones that weren't just funny. The ones that were personal. The ones where confidence didn't just bounce off the world, but started breaking things. That's where this stops being a comedy and starts looking like a warning. The most uncomfortable one happened in a public health lecture. A student named Jordan decided that modern medicine was mostly a marketing strategy with better lighting. "I don't trust hospitals," he said. "I've been following doctors who explain how the body heals itself if you stop interfering." The professor, who had spent 2 decades in emergency medicine before teaching, asked him what he meant by stop interfering. Like, no unnecessary drugs. No invasive procedures. The body knows what to do if you listen to it. They were discussing sepsis, the kind of topic that does not tolerate poetry. Jordan said antibiotics were a crutch, and that fever was the body burning out impurities. The professor showed survival rates. Case studies. The history of what happens when infections get to make their own decisions. "That's fear-based medicine," Jordan replied. "You're trained to see danger everywhere." Later that semester, Jordan missed 2 weeks of class. When he came back, he looked thinner and quieter. He didn't talk much anymore. Someone said he tried to treat a serious infection at home because he didn't want to interrupt the process. He ended up in the hospital anyway. He passed the course. He stopped arguing. I was a TA in a foreign policy class taught by a former ambassador. The kind of person who uses phrases like, "in my first month in Kabul," without noticing how strange that sounds. A student named Kevin decided the professor's experience was a liability. "You're too close to it," Kevin said. "I follow several analysts who explain what's really going on." The professor asked him to name 3 major cities in the region they were discussing. Kevin couldn't. He pivoted. "That's not the point. Geography is just a distraction from power structures." The professor nodded politely and continued the lecture. On the midterm, Kevin wrote an essay full of strong opinions and 0 locations. He told me the grade proved academia was afraid of independent geopolitical thought. In a teacher training program, a student named Melissa announced that formal education was mostly psychological conditioning. "Kids learn better when you don't impose structure," she said. "Grades are a form of control." The instructor asked how she planned to assess learning. "You don't," Melissa said. "You trust the process." During her practicum, she let students do whatever they felt like. They mostly felt like doing nothing. Her supervising teacher asked where the lesson plan was. "Plans limit growth," Melissa replied. Her evaluation said insufficient classroom management. She said the system was afraid of liberated minds. In a data science course, a student named Omar argued that statistics were just opinion with math. "Numbers don't capture human complexity," he said. The instructor agreed, then explained why that doesn't make numbers optional. Omar's project involved ignoring any data points that felt wrong. His conclusions were beautiful. They were also meaningless. When he failed, he said the department was biased toward cold, inhuman thinking. By the time you've seen enough of these, you stop laughing as easily. Not because the stories aren't funny. They are. It's because you start to notice what they cost. Most of these people aren't malicious. They're not trying to burn anything down. They're trying to skip a line. They're trying to avoid the long, private, slightly humiliating process of discovering how much they don't know. Real learning is mostly a series of small defeats. You try something. It doesn't work. You adjust. You realize your favorite idea has a crack in it. You fix the crack or you throw the idea away. Nobody applauds. Nobody shares it. But the world gets a little less broken because of it. The shortcut promises a different story. A cleaner one. You don't have to be a beginner. You don't have to be confused. You don't have to sit quietly while someone else explains something you don't understand yet. You can be the person who sees through things. The person who isn't fooled. The person who is, finally, special. And for a while, that feels incredible. The internet is very good at feeding that feeling. It rewards volume over accuracy, confidence over caution, drama over patience. It doesn't care if you're right. It cares if you're loud. So people learn to perform certainty. They learn the posture, the tone, the vocabulary of revelation. But the world doesn't run on posture. Bridges still need margins. Bodies still need antibiotics. Languages still change. Numbers still count. And gravity, no matter how outdated you think it is, remains stubbornly current. The tragedy isn't that people are wrong. The tragedy is when being wrong becomes part of their identity, and any correction feels like an attack. That's when curiosity stops. That's when learning turns into theater. That's when every system becomes an enemy, and every disagreement becomes proof. What I've learned from watching all of this isn't that experts are always right. They aren't. It's that good experts are easy to recognize because they're comfortable saying three very unglamorous words. I don't know. And then they go find out. That's the part nobody puts in a thumbnail. The quiet work. The revisions. The footnotes. The spreadsheets. The failed drafts. The second attempts. The third. The fourth. The humility of changing your mind without turning it into a performance. Confidence feels like power. But most of the things that actually work in this world are built by people who spend a long time being unsure in private. So whenever I hear someone start a sentence with "they don't want you to know," I don't get angry anymore. I just listen. And I wait for the part where the world, very politely and very consistently, refuses to move out of their way. It almost never does.